Thank you very much for having the association here today. I'm a little different type of speaker than you're getting today. I'm kind of a nuts and bolts, boot on the ground type of guy that looks at tools and ways that you can prepare to deal with it, kind of like you're just-in-time training. And that's key. And you can see people are getting excited now about, wow, where do we need to go with this? Well, when I go through the slides here, one of the things that you're going to see that's very prevalent, and we've already seen it with the first two great speakers, is that there's some real commonalities here. There's also there's some significant differences in each of the groups, but there are some commonalities. So one of the things that I would suggest to the groups this afternoon is you might look at the commonalities and prepare something that will guide you through that, and then maybe break it up after that into the specific needs for each of the groups and what are the considerations. So when I go through the slides today on the Alzheimer's disease, the similarities will jump right out. The fact that how do you approach them, how do you talk to them, how do you manage them during the disaster, during day-to-day activities, very, very similar. And then there will be some differences that I will point out that I see, but you'll probably see some other things too. One of the things that I want to draw your attention to is I want to make sure we did these handouts, 3 handouts, in addition to what your packet has. Please make sure that you all have one of the purple cards, and I'll explain the significance of the card. And the reason that I brought these specific handouts is so that you could utilize them not just for Alzheimer's, but also to build what you need for your specific needs. And on that note, that's what I also would encourage you to do. You need to look at your own specific needs. You know, when we're preparing, when the Red Cross says you need to have a disaster response kit for yourself, they have some basics that they list. You know, the flashlight and the water and some food, maybe some shelter considerations, but they also emphasize, take a look at yourself personally and what your needs are. Medications. Sam had, I believe she had a canine partner in the first video. So she's going to need some considerations for her canine partner, maybe some medications for the canine, some food. So take a look at your specific needs. Those of you that are working in care facilities or managing care facilities where people are housed there, you're going to have some very special needs for those unique individuals that you have. So none of this will work for all of you, but it is going to be a guide for you to springboard off of. The other handout is a general handout on the Alzheimer's Association. When I first started volunteering with the Alzheimer's Association, I was amazed at the number of people, the large number of people that had been caring for their loved ones for many years and didn't even know an association exists. And this is not news to you. You know, those of you that are involved with special groups, support groups, are probably shocked ongoingly about, wow, you didn't even know we existed and we could have helped you with so many things in all those years. The Alzheimer's disease is a disease that impacts the brain and the cognitive functions. It kills the brain. The brain dies over a period of time. That time can be extensive, 3 to 20 years, with the average time being 8 years. So these people care 7/24 for their loved ones, 7/24 for many years. It's extremely demanding. It's what they do, and that's all they do. And the association has many benefits that they can provide for those individuals. The other one is a trifold that's not currently in its form, a trifold that is in its final draft form. Now, I emphasize that because this is something that you may see that you go, wow, this is good. It's two-sided. There's a ton of information on here. But something like this that you use as a trifold or an informational sheet for your employees or the other people that work with you, the volunteers that come in, can be an ideal thing for just-in-time training to build from. So think as simple as something like this where you give it to them and they run down one of the sides and it says, when you encounter a person with dementia, what do you do? And if you look at these, the similarities from the first two presentations are very obvious. Let's go ahead and start with the PowerPoint. Now I've got 2 buttons. I shouldn't screw this up, okay? But And the technology has been excellent so far. Thank you. I told them I would throw some curves at them. I also have a very quick video that's provided by Alzheimer's for first responder training. Now, a lot of times, and I've been a first responder for over 35 years in the county, a lot of people think first responders are law enforcement fire. Well, I disagree. I would suggest to you that you're probably all first responders. I train CERT teams, I train trolley driver academies, bus driver academies. When you're the first one that contacts this person in a situation, you're a first responder, and you need to understand all of this information as law enforcement does and fire. I also train at the Law Enforcement Academy and some of the other volunteer programs with the sheriff and San Diego Police Departments and other law enforcement agencies in the county. So I hit the more traditional first responders, but I suggest to you, when you hear first responder, think of yourself. What is dementia? It's a loss of cognitive abilities. That's dementia. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. My nephew has been in a care facility for many years. When he was in his early 20s, he was ejected from his car, landed on his head. They removed a big portion of his brain, and he's lived in that care facility ever since. He was, I think, 21, 22 at the time. He's probably close to 40 now. Tragic. Some of the very same symptoms, if you want to call them that, the same result of Alzheimer's is impacting him. Short-term memory loss, those type of functions. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. It's the significant portion of dementia. It's probably about 70% of the cases. And in the county of San Diego, in Imperial counties, because Alzheimer's, like Red Cross and some of the other associations, cover both counties, we have an estimate of 53,000 people with Alzheimer's. 53,000 people. Now, Alzheimer's is a diagnosis of exclusion. So you'll go into an evaluation, if you will. You'll go through a battery of tests. They eliminate these other things, medication conflicts, something like maybe a tumor in your brain or some other causes of dementia. They'll eliminate those. They come down to measuring it's probably Alzheimer's. And currently, the diagnosis is confirmed in autopsy, which obviously is a little late. And they are working on developing a better system for that and developing what causes it, and then hopefully some treatment or a cure. 1 in 8, 65 and older, 50%, 85 and older. Well, here's the tough information about Alzheimer's. Probably the number one risk factor is age. Well, we as we know, we have an aging population. So Alzheimer's and dementia is going to just get more impactful, a greater number in our community that we need to manage, address, and especially during disasters. You heard about the stressful impacts of disasters. How many of you were here in 03 for the fires? How about 07? The vast majority of you. I was evacuated in 03 from the home that we raised our family in. Luckily for me, I didn't lose the home in the fire, but it was very emotional for me, and I had been a first responder for many years at that point. It's interesting, too, that you see that one of the risk groups for impact is the responders, the rescuers. So this is a very emotional, unsettling event for all of us, Now imagine if you have cognitive disabilities or inhibited cognitive function where you're now trying to manage what's going on. In '78, I was in the academy. We were having our dead body training at the medical examiner's office. Big puff of smoke. They loaded us on a bus and they drove us to North Park for the mid-air collision. I was still in the academy. They marched us through the scene, and then they had us do a variety of things. Collection of body parts, collections of plane parts, and one of the more impactful things was we went door to door to knock on the doors because these things, this crash had, parts had come through the houses and things like that. We knocked on the doors of those houses to check on the welfare of the people there. Also to evaluate, did they have any damage to the home? Is there some concern there? Do we need to collect anything? If they're okay, people were hesitant to answer their doors. This was typically an older community. They just basically figured, that's it. This is it. It's over. They hunkered down, and we had to be very persistent to get them to even answer the door. So, problem with evacuations? I think so. Plus, evacuations are usually just, in a fire evacuation, you're just knocking on doors and letting people know, hey, there's fire, you got to get out. Hey, there's fire, you got to get out. In '03, I was activated by the Red Cross before I was activated by the Sheriff's Department. I responded as a governmental liaison, and Mona's in the room that activated me. I responded as a governmental liaison to the Lakeside Rodeo to establish that relationship with law enforcement and the responders they were setting up. As it turned out to be, it turned out to be like a Noah's Ark for animals. We had trailers coming up, and they were just dumping off animals and everything else, and they were coming to me to go, I need mucking rakes. I didn't even know what a mucking rake was. But I need mucking rakes. Okay, I'll get you one as soon as I figure out what it is. I'm there about 2 hours with my wife and daughter. My son's at home, and he calls, Dad, a deputy knocked on the door. He's 12 years old. A deputy knocked on the door and says, we got to leave. And he just moves on. 12-year-old boy in the house. When you think about knocking on the door, and I'm not judging the deputy, because I was one. He did a fine job. Anyway, I'm not criticizing him. It's just the function of that notification is a little unrealistic as it ties into people with special needs, special considerations. You can't just knock on the door and move on. To some degree, when a person with Alzheimer's walks into your shelter, you own them. And that means you're with them. You assign somebody with them. You can't leave them alone. They'll wander off. Roughly anywhere between 60 to 70 people wander with Alzheimer's. What does that mean? They just walk away. I volunteer with Sheriff Search and Rescue. I came back as a volunteer after I quit the department. And 90% of our calls are people with dementia and Alzheimer's wandering in an urban environment, in your neighborhoods. They're walking away. A lot of them, you'll hear over the radio, a repeat offender. Well, what that means, they're not a suspect, but what that means is this isn't the first time, and it's not. If they start to wander, they'll wander more and more, and they tend to wander when they're in an agitated state, confused state, stressful state, like an evacuation, like at a shelter at the Red Cross or one of the other evacuation centers. You think? I've been in shelters before. A lot of you had. Little disruptive, little noisy, a lot going on. Not much staffing because it's just the way it is. And now you've got somebody in there that needs one-on-one care. Vulnerable to physical and emotional trauma. Chaotic situations. Uniquely vulnerable. We're all vulnerable. You know what was interesting? Getting back to that 78 plane crash. I drove 805 for many years after that. And when I would drive by that area, even at that distance from the North Park area, I would smell the jet fuel. And I went, my gosh, it's been years. It's been years. You think they'd have been able to get rid of that after now. Right? Now, some of you are going, well, you knucklehead. We know what that is. So, and smell is one of the key triggering for memories. That's why the perfume and cologne industry does so well. Hopefully those memories are good. But, here's mine, and I remembered I would go by that location and smell that all the time. And I started handling later in my career, I worked homicide for 8 years, and we did officer-involved shootings. And I went through a lot of post-trauma stress classes to prepare myself in talking to and supporting the officers that have been involved in officer-involved shootings. And I'm in the class and have a realization, one of those aha moments when you get educated a little bit and you realize, my gosh, that's what I had all those years. And eventually just went away. I would eventually, that got cleared up. I don't smell it anymore. But I connected that smell to that location, and when I drove by the location, I would smell that. Probably a lot of other things were happening to me that I was unaware of too. Luckily, I didn't frequent that on a regular basis, or it might have been even more traumatizing to me. Look at that. I can go backwards. I've got the buttons wired. This is good. Take a look at this, though, in terms of, and I'm looking down because we've got a monitor here. I'm looking at the first two speakers going, why do they keep looking down? They're not looking over here. You guys are great. This is wonderful. 2,300 nursing home fires each year. What? I looked at this and went, what? You got to be kidding me. That's huge. You know, when we think disasters, we think the big earthquake. We think, oh, the big fires we had in 03 and 07. Look, this is what the Red Cross responds to weekly, sometimes daily, is home and apartment fires. For you in facilities, this is probably your most realistic issue, and then evacuation following. I heard some of the twisters back east here that we had recently, that they had a hospital that got 20 minutes notice to evacuate. A hospital. Now we're all going, come on, that's ridiculous. That gives you about enough time to go get a cup of coffee and sit down and just wait for it to pass and figure out what you do after that. They evacuated in 20 minutes. I don't know what that means. I didn't get any more on the story. It probably means that they were able to move the patients to interior rooms. And luckily they didn't get hit harder than they did. You know they're not emptying out that hospital in 20 minutes. There's no way. It takes you longer than that to figure out, where's that just-in-time training? Where did I put the plan? And to respond. But kudos to them. So here's another takeaway, if you can. Be real. Be real about what your notice is going to be, and be real about what you're staffing. You know, we often staff our plans with optimum staff. And then it happens at 3 o'clock in the morning. And you're going, what? I got 2 people. What am I going to do? Be real about your plans. Be real about what you're facing. How many of you have been watching that disaster preparedness, I forget the name of it, that new show on National Geographic with the prepared people? Oh my gosh. Huh? Yeah. Oh, doomsday. Well, first of all, they talk about what the scenario is. And some of them are pretty phenomenal. And then they go into their preparations. But that's the first thing you need to do, is be real about your scenario. Pick a scenario that's probable. 2,300 nursing home fires. Be real about your scenario. What's the impact of that scenario? And train and prep for that, along with the other ones, but concentrate on the more real ones. It's probably not going to be. We had Golden Guardian here 3 years ago or so, dealt with a major earthquake on the San Andreas. The true impact to our county was 1 death at the initial review of that scenario. Now, they changed the scenario a little bit so that San Diego emergency responders could respond and use their resources. But at the time, they said, well, the initial reports is 1 death. I don't know who that poor soul was. And, you know, so if you hear a major earthquake and you heard someone died, you're safe. It's just 1 death. So as long as that's not yours. But the point is, be real about your impact. Be real about what disaster you're looking at and the probabilities of it. I'm not saying you don't give some thought to those other ones, but this is probably, this 2,300 fires, this may be what you really need to look at. And then evacuation, and what does that look like for you? Does it mean maybe just moving them to another location on site? Probably. Does it mean, do you have the vehicles, and what's it going to mean to get vehicles over here to evacuate everyone? Reactions may include, did you not see this on the first slides? I mean, they can't even understand what's going on. Here's one of the unique things with Alzheimer's. Well, to some of the issues that we talked about. First of all, and I think one of them said, if you've seen this one, you've seen one? Yeah. Okay, that's the same with Alzheimer's. You may know people. How many of you have personal knowledge and been around somebody with dementia and Alzheimer's? Look at this. Look around. This is 3/4 of you. Okay, that person that you knew or know that's going through the disease, you know one person. What does that mean? Well, that means that, again, 3 to 20 years it's terminal. It's a terminal disease. 3 to 20 years. Well, that's a big range. What's the progression of the disease? Yes. Yes, it is. It will progress. Well, how's that going to impact your person? Yes. How did it impact your loved one? Okay, that's how it impacted your loved one. So when you come up to somebody with Alzheimer's, you can expect certain commonalities. You're going to need to. This is a takeaway card. This is a card that I give to all law enforcement, fire, to put in their notebook or to put in their equipment bag to pull out when they have contact. One of the things on here is talk tactics. Talk tactics. And the other thing, it talks about how you approach them. One-on-one, slowly, quietly. You pose a question, one question, and you wait, giving them ample time to respond because they're processing the information. Sound similar? These are the common things that I think we could all put on our initial sheet. Get them to a quiet area. I spoke to a person that was in a shelter that was managing people that have trouble when they're overloaded with stimulus. And they walked into this huge gymnasium, which is loud, noisy, chaotic, and off in one end was a tent that they had put up in the gymnasium, a large tent. And in that tent was where they had the people that needed reduced stimulus. And they had a staff person in that tent. An adjacent room might be a better way, or another way. But you may want to think about, how am I going to manage this person that is maybe a little overloaded? The other unique thing with Alzheimer's is they will have a distorted time reference in terms of what year it is, where am I? Well, a lot of times when you contact the people, when we find them that are out wandering and we go, where are you going? They'll go, well, I'm going to work. I work at Roar in Chula Vista. They're in Fallbrook. And they're walking north. I go here all the time. I go here every morning. When I get up, I go to work, and that's where I'm going. And they're in their underwear, and they're walking down the street. They don't have a good relationship sometimes on when it is. Also, there's a section of the First Responder DVD, which we'll take a look at in a moment. We'll do it on disaster and emergencies, but one of them is on firearm safety. Half the homes out there that have Alzheimer's patients have firearms. And a big portion of those are loaded firearms. And they'll watch something on TV, like a war movie or something like that, and they're back in Korea. They're back in Vietnam. They're back, or they think that's happening outside. And you knock on the door for an evacuation in uniform, what are they thinking? Who knows? So keep in mind the safety issue. If you're talking to them and they're kind of dressed in their old uniform shirt or something, and you're going, where are you at right now? You know, where do you think you're at? Do you understand you're in a shelter and there's been a fire and that's why they knocked on the door? Those emergency vehicles were not military vehicles. They can have a distortion on when it is and what they're dealing with. So please keep that in mind when you're managing an Alzheimer's patient, that you need to get a grasp on where they're at. You don't argue with them. You don't contradict them because it just agitates them more. You just support them and try to bring the same things we've talked about all morning, a calmness, a routine. You're there to help. You explain who you are. You try to explain where they're at, and you can reaffirm that later, because later in the day when they get some food in them and they've calmed down a little bit, they may be a little bit more receptive to understanding where they're at. Overloads and exaggerate. We have this. One of the things I mentioned, I volunteer with Search and Rescue. We just bought, a couple months ago, a border collie puppy to train for search and rescue. What was I thinking? I wanted a high-energy dog so they'll work. What was I thinking? Why couldn't I have gotten just some lump dog that sits over there in the corner and sleeps all day? Oh no, I had to go get a border collie puppy. So, they said, can you come and do this presentation? I'm thinking, well, yeah, get out of the house. But the other thing is like, whoa, stressful, normal stressful things that were going on or changes in our, okay, now you have dementia. Now you have one of these other issues that we've talked about this morning, and you're going through a stressful event, like I talked about. The people in 78, when we knocked on their door and they figured it's the end of the world. They're done. They're sitting in their house in a chair All the lights are off, TV's off, and they're just sitting there. What happened? Well, we figured it was in a big explosion, big boom. It's it. That's it. They've been waiting for that. We trained for years hiding under our desks for the nuclear explosion. Come on, yeah. Hiding under our desks. That was before the Red Cross really got involved in those things. Kurt wouldn't have had us do that. But, we were ready for that, and then the big explosion. How about '03 for me? We're evacuating our home. I know it's just a house, it's a structure, but all those feelings and emotions and your security, your safety is in that. I mean, everything that was like warm and fuzzy is in that home, and all the memories, and it's gone. So you uproot somebody if you can figure out a good evacuation procedure for these people that have special needs to evacuate. You evacuate them, you put them in a shelter, you don't leave them alone. I tell the trolley workers, when you find them, and they find them all the time on the trolley. Why? Because they don't have to buy a ticket. And when the people come on there to check for tickets, they're taking care of the person. That's okay. That's all right. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Next time, pay twice. Don't worry about it. Nice, older people, they're helping out. And then they find them on that line 3 hours later, just riding the trolley. Or they'll see them at the trolley stop, back and forth. And what I tell them is, you touch them, you keep them. You stay with them, don't leave them, because they'll just wander off. And you'll lose them, and they're at risk. These people have other medical needs. If they're not found in the first 24 hours, we find a majority of them deceased. These are older people. They're vulnerable to the elements. Even in San Diego, we have elements. 50 degrees at night will kill an 80-year-old in their underwear. It'd probably kill me in my underwear. And it wouldn't be pretty either. But, our elements are enough. Plus, they're suffering from other illnesses. And they don't have their medication. They've missed it. And they don't have their nutrition. They've missed it. And we've got to find them in the first 24 hours. That's how important it is that when you touch them, when you make contact, they're yours. And they call their security, they call law enforcement to come over and take over that responsibility, and they can go back to work. Hide, fight, flight, fight, right? Hide, fight, pacing, refuse to leave, and then they wander. If you can manage them and manage their personality change, you've got to still stay on them, stay with them, or give them a function that they're going to be supervised with. One of the things, I'm a Red Cross volunteer, as I mentioned in '03. I want sheltering training, and one of the things I worked on, very technical and difficult, is I made bologna sandwiches for about 3 hours one day in a shelter. You can assign these individuals a function that they can do that gives them purpose and function and focus, and you're also supervising them at the same time. Now, they're not all going to be receptive to that, but some of them will be, and that's part of that evaluation stage when they come into the shelter and into the care facility. Look at that statistic. I looked at that and went, what? At least one long-term care facility resident will wander away and die each week, if not addressed aggressively. That's huge. And care facilities, we have a great care facility system compared to other countries, absolutely. Do we need more? Absolutely. Absolutely. We deal with a very small percentage of our population that need 24/7 care. Because we just don't have the facilities. Almost always they're full with waiting lists. When we were getting my nephew in one, it was amazingly difficult to find one that would take him because he requires a lot of care. And he doesn't have a lot of money. So it's, well, what will Social Security pay for, and can we find a facility to do that? But care facilities sometimes ignore the possibility that their residents will wander. And they do wander from the care facilities. They do. Most Alzheimer's patients are at home with caregivers not on site that check in on them periodically. The sheriffs have a program called You're Not Alone, and they make phone calls and they drive by and check on people that don't have anybody else. Confusion. Inability to recognize familiar people. We all know the stories that that they don't remember their loved ones. They don't remember who they are. That is a normal progression that usually impacts, if they don't die very, very quickly, it usually impacts all dementia, Alzheimer's patients. But that makes it difficult for you when the sister arrives to help you manage the person, and they don't even know who she is. So it just adds another element that kind of throws a curve at you. Now, this may not, for those of you that aren't involved with search and rescue, 95% are found within a mile and a half. Oh, a mile and a half. Oh, that's not far. A mile and a half from here in all directions. Where do you start? That's one of the reasons, unfortunately, we don't find them right away. And how far can they wander? Miles. They walk for miles. Unfortunately, when I was in homicide, we went to a case of a gentleman that left a care facility with a walker. Now, Fallbrook is very hilly, very steep areas. And law enforcement searched in the highest probability areas, and then a resident unfortunately found him deceased in their backyard. He had gone up a very steep hill with his walker, chucked his walker aside because it got too rough, and manipulated climbing over car parts and other debris in the backyard until he kind of got back behind the house and just laid down and passed away. I would have never thought of looking there. It was a long ways from the care facility, and it was in rough terrain. So how far can they get? And then if you throw in transit, bus, trolley, if they have a car, they wander in their cars. And they drive until they run out of gas. You respond to the emotion that they're experiencing. You validate it. You're empathetic to what they're feeling. You're calm, patient. Does this look familiar? This is the commonalities that I was seeing from the first two presentations going, wow, let's work with these. Maybe that's your just-in-time training at a shelter is when these people come in, these are the basics, if you will. This is something that everybody should be treated this way. Frankly, everybody should be treated that way. Anybody that goes into a shelter is frantic, anxiety-ridden. Loudness conveys anger, quiet, short, simple words, yes or no questions from one person. So when I talk to, law enforcement and other people that usually swarm this person, back off, one person, talk slow, only that one person, and give them time to respond. They're not going to respond as quickly. They're processing the information. Avoid correcting, bless you. Avoid correcting them or providing reality orientation. It just frustrates them. And you can get that exaggerated response. Excuse me, one of the things, I talked to this lady that worked in a care facility for 7 years. She was responsible for putting together the disaster plan, response plan, unique situation response plan, if you want to call it that. And the reality was, great plan. It's a great process to go through. It helps you identify a lot of things. They never practiced it. They never looked at it again. Sheriff's Department has all these plans. And when I worked emergency planning and supported the Sheriff's Department in that function, I walked into this room, it's full of these plans. The emergency response plan for County Office of Emergency Services is excellent and huge, not something that you'll be able to look at the time. But when you get there, they have not only just-in-time training, but they have position training sheets so that when you fill a function there, you pull out the notebook and it says, all right, get your cup of coffee, put on your vest, identifying what you do, sit down, this is how you log in, walks you through what you need. Again, another suggestion, think about that for functions, emergency functions in your organizations, and take a look at them every year. And how about turnover? New person orientation should have a piece of this. You know your residents. It needs to be unique to your facility. It needs to be unique to your residents and set it up that way. Don't take a generic plan and just blow it off and take the plan. Look at the plan for your needs. And the needs are going to change. That's why you need to look at it. Let's take a look at that video. It's only about 5 minutes. Is that all right? Okay. Let's take a quick look at that video on disaster emergency response.
For first responders, emergencies and natural disasters may pose the ultimate challenge. With many factors beyond our control, we attempt to mobilize people and resources to save lives, prevent additional injuries and death. I'm Tom Friel, a firefighter and EMT. In the course of my work, I often encounter people with dementia who are frightened, confused, and irrational. We need to prepare to deal quickly and effectively with them, since time is usually short and the risk is great.
I know there's a fire in the building, but my husband, he won't leave.
Okay, well, we have to go to the second floor, ma'am, for the fire.
He has Alzheimer's and he won't go.
If relatives or nursing home staff members are around, ask them for information that could help get the person with dementia to comply.
All right, is there anything special he likes to do or anybody he likes to spend time with?
Well, he loves his grandson.
What's the boy's name?
David!
Okay, you go with this firefighter, I'll go bring him out. Mr. Marks? Sir, I'm with the fire department. We need to get you out of the building. Sir? Sir, your grandson. He's outside.
David?
Yes, David.
Where?
Outside. Come with me. I'll help you find him.
When dealing with someone who has dementia, you probably won't have much success using reason. Instead, try to address any emotion the person expresses, calming fears, offering reassurance.
Hello, David? Oh, I'm okay. I love you too.
Leaving familiar places can be especially hard on this population. So if people with dementia are taken to an emergency shelter, for example, you may need to provide support.
Mickey, what? This is not. No, I can't find my keys.
Mickey, you're okay.
I can't find my keys.
We'll find
Someone took my keys.
Hi,
Mickey,
folks.
we will find it.
How's it going?
Well, my husband, he is not used to being away from home. He doesn't know why we are here and why we had to leave.
Okay, what's his name?
His name is Mickey.
Hi, Mickey. I'm Joe. I'm a paramedic. And I'm glad that you're here. You're safe here. And actually, we could use your help. Could you help us?
Yeah, sure. Come on, sure.
Right this way.
People with dementia may become agitated in loud, busy places. There's just too much going on, so if possible, take them to a quiet spot and give them a task to do. That could take their mind off a stressful situation. When providing instructions, use simple language, short questions and answers to convey information. Often, people with dementia will need one-on-one instruction. They may not understand directions given to a group. Remember that people with dementia are especially sensitive to emotional and physical trauma. They have limited ability to understand what's going on, may forget what they've been told, and are easily agitated, frustrated, or overwhelmed. In these situations, they're more likely to wander off, so someone should be keeping an eye on them.
You've now completed all 6 segments of our program. You have some idea of how to identify people with dementia. They're often confused, may be agitated, especially when they're tired, and they can become abusive. As the disease progresses, it makes driving a dangerous proposition, so family members should monitor relatives with Alzheimer's, and police officers should issue tickets when there are traffic violations, if only to build a case for revoking a license if necessary. People with dementia should not have access to weapons, and in cases of domestic violence, it's important to involve social service agencies to support patients and caregivers. Finally, remember that you play a central role in assisting people who urgently need protection. When you talk with someone who may have dementia, introduce yourself, explain that you're here to help. Speak slowly in a friendly, supportive tone. Don't confront or accuse, instead offer reassurance and resources. Should you have questions or encounter problems in the field, the Alzheimer's Association invites you to call their 24-hour helpline at 1-800-272-3900. On behalf of the association, I thank you for taking the time to watch this program.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.